Osiris, the benevolent king who had brought civilization to Egypt, was celebrating a feast in his palace when his brother Set arrived, carrying a magnificently decorated sarcophagus. "My brother," said Set, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "I've brought a special gift." This sarcophagus was made by the finest craftsman. Whoever fits perfectly inside it may keep it. Osiris, always generous and trusting, didn't perceive the malice in his brother's words. "What an interesting idea, Set. Let me try it." The moment Osiris lay down in the sarcophagus, Set and his 72 conspirators sealed the lid and soldered it with molten lead. "Now I am the only king of Egypt," shouted Set, as they threw the sarcophagus into the Nile. Inside the sealed sarcophagus, Osiris felt life leaving his physical body. But something extraordinary happened. His consciousness didn't extinguish. Instead, he found himself floating above his physical body, watching the sarcophagus being carried by the Nile's waters. "I am dead," Osiris realized, "but I still exist. Death is not the end of consciousness, but its liberation from the physical body." At that moment, Thoth, the god of wisdom, appeared before him. "Osiris," said Thoth, "you are experiencing what every human soul will experience. Your journey will now be the model for all who die after you. What must I do?" "First, you must understand that there are different aspects of your being," explained Thoth. "Your Ka, life force, remains connected to the physical body. Your Ba, soul personality, is what is conscious now, and your Ak, glorified spirit, must still be created through transformation." Osiris found himself being pulled into a dimension he didn't know, the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. "This will be my kingdom," he understood, "but first I must learn its mysteries." He traversed regions of absolute darkness, where demons tried to confuse his mind with illusions of his past life. "Remember," whispered an inner voice, "you are not just Osiris the king, you are eternal consciousness experiencing the form of Osiris." Next, he came to the river of fire, where his actions in life were tested. "Every act of kindness I practiced," observed Osiris, "now manifests as light that protects me from the flames." Finally, he arrived at the Hall of Judgment, where he encountered 42 divine judges. "Even being a god," Osiris understood, "I must pass through the same judgment that every soul will face." Meanwhile, in the physical world, Isis had discovered her husband's disappearance. Through visions and divine guidance, she followed the sarcophagus to Byblos, in Phoenicia, where it had lodged in the trunk of a tree that grew around it. "Sad, my beloved, weeping, wept Isis upon recovering the body. 'I will bring you back,' but Set discovered what she had done. In fury, he stole Osiris's body and dismembered it into 14 parts, scattering them throughout Egypt. "Now," roared Set, "he can never return." Isis, aided by her sister Nephthys, began a desperate search for the parts of Osiris's body. Each piece, Isis understood, represents an aspect of the soul that must be reunited for complete resurrection. She found the heart in Abydos, the center of love and compassion, the eyes in Heliopolis, spiritual vision, the hands in Memphis, the power to create and bless, the feet in Edfu, the ability to walk between worlds. Each recovered part was mummified and consecrated in a temple, creating 14 sacred centers throughout Egypt. When Isis gathered 13 of the 14 parts, only the phallus was not found, having been devoured by a fish. She performed the first mummification ritual in history. Using powerful magic and unconditional love, she temporarily reanimated Osiris. "My beloved," said Isis, "you cannot permanently return to the world of the living, but you can choose your destiny." Osiris, now transformed, understood his mission. I will become the Lord of the Duat, he decided. I will guide all souls who pass through death, judging them with justice and compassion. In the Duat, Osiris assumed his throne as supreme judge of the dead. His experience of betrayal, death, dismemberment, and resurrection had transformed him into the perfect guide for other souls. Now I understand, said Osiris to Thoth, why I had to go through this journey. Every soul that dies will face aspects of what I experienced. Explain, requested Thoth. Every soul will experience betrayal, either by others or by their own illusions. Every soul will be dismembered, their earthly attachments and identities will be dissolved, and every soul will have the opportunity for resurrection, transformation into a higher being. Osiris established the principles that would govern the judgment of the dead. First lesson: physical death is not destruction, but transformation. Consciousness continues, but in a new form. Second lesson: the soul must be dismembered, must release attachments to the earthly ego before it can be reunited in a higher form. Third lesson: unconditional love, represented by Isis, is the force that enables spiritual resurrection. Fourth lesson: suffering and betrayal, when accepted with wisdom, become tools of transformation. Fifth lesson: the soul is judged not for punishment, but to determine its next stage of evolution. Thoth, witness to Osiris's entire journey, began recording the teachings. This knowledge, he said, must be preserved to guide future souls on their journey. Yes, agreed Osiris, but not just as a story. As a practical map, every soul that dies will follow a variation of this same journey. Thoth created the first texts that would become the Book of the Dead, including protection formulas against the dangers of the Duat, based on Osiris's experiences, words of power to cross the guarded gates, learned during Osiris's journey, instructions for judgment based on what Osiris established as supreme judge, transformation visualizations modeled on Osiris's resurrection. There is one final secret, revealed Osiris to Thoth, that only the most prepared can understand. What secret? The journey I experienced after death can also be lived consciously during life, said Osiris. Those who learn to die to the ego, to reunite the fragmented aspects of themselves, and to resurrect in higher consciousness, need not fear physical death. They will have already completed the essential transformation. From that moment, Osiris became the model for all spiritual transformation. His myth was enacted in sacred mysteries, where initiates symbolically experienced his journey of death and rebirth. Every person taught Osiris carries within themselves the potential for their own resurrection. Physical death is just one form of this transformation. True death is the dissolution of the separate ego. True resurrection is awakening to divine nature. The Book of the Dead, based on Osiris's journey, offered specific guidance, preparation in life. Practice dying daily through meditation, releasing attachments and identifications. Reunification. Integrate fragmented aspects of your personality through self-knowledge. Inner judgment. Regularly examine your actions and motivations with compassionate honesty. Conscious resurrection. Cultivate identity based on your eternal spiritual nature, not on temporary circumstances. Shocking evidence suggests your life didn't just start when you were born, and it won't truly end when you die. From children who clearly remember past lives to hypnotized subjects describing the same spiritual world, the clues are undeniable. Could it be that your soul has been navigating an intricate journey across countless lifetimes? Stick around, because what we uncover could forever change how you see your existence. Imagine for a moment living in a world without the constant buzz of modern distractions. A world where people look to the stars, the earth, and the mysteries of life itself for answers. Ancient civilizations didn't shrug off the question of what happens after death. Instead, they crafted intricate roadmaps for the soul's journey. These weren't just vague mythologies either. They were profound, detailed guides meant to lead the departed through an unseen spiritual reality. Could these ancient texts hold insights not only into what these civilizations believed, but into something deeper, something universal about the human soul? Take the Egyptian Book of the Dead, for instance. This was no mere storybook for the afterlife. Egyptians believed it was an actual manual of instructions, containing spells and guidance to help the soul navigate the treacherous pathways of the Duat, their version of the underworld. The journey required more than bravery. It demanded keen awareness and the ability to call upon divine protection at every turn. The soul would encounter a series of tests along the way, gatekeepers who might pose riddles, monstrous entities who sought to obstruct progress, and most famously, the weighing of the heart. Here, the deceased's heart was measured against the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and harmony. If the scale balanced, the soul advanced toward eternal peace. If not, well, let's just say that eternal peace wasn't in the cards. Now, shift your focus to a completely different part of the world, the Tibetan highlands. Millennia later, the Bardo Thodol, or what we often call the Tibetan Book of the Dead, came into being. This text is striking in its detail. The word Bardo literally means an intermediate state, and much like the Egyptians' view of the Duat, this intermediate state was a place where the soul would linger between death and rebirth. Tibetan Buddhism teaches that after death, there are 49 days during which the soul experiences vivid, often challenging visions as it transitions. These visions might morph between states of serene beauty and terrifying chaos, but they aren't meaningless. Each experience is an opportunity, a chance for liberation or a step toward the next incarnation. The ultimate aim is to recognize the visions for what they truly are, manifestations of the mind, rather than literal. What makes these two texts so captivating isn't just their complexity, but their strange similarities. The Egyptian and Tibetan cultures grew independently, separated by geography, time, and vastly different belief systems. So why do these manuals for the afterlife echo each other in such specific ways? Both describe journeys marked by trials, moments of reflection, and crucial decisions made by the soul. Both suggest the presence of guides, deities, spirits, or energies who assist in navigating these realms. And both emphasize that life and death aren't endpoints, but part of a continuous cycle. Interestingly, modern scholars and spiritual thinkers alike see themes in these texts that seem almost archetypal, universal to human experiences of transition and transformation. Whether it's the Egyptian focus on maintaining cosmic order or the Tibetan emphasis on inner awareness, the underlying messages align. The soul doesn't wander aimlessly after death. There's a structure, a process, and likely a deeper purpose. These parallels might hint at something fascinating. What if these texts weren't built solely from cultural imagination? Could they be based on real experiences that individuals in altered states, whether through trance, meditation, or even near-death experiences, were able to access and describe? It raises a tantalizing possibility that these civilizations glimpsed truths that extend beyond any one religion or tradition. Human beings across time and place have always sought to make sense of life's great mysteries. The Egyptian Book of the Dead and the Tibetan Bardo Thodol are more than artifacts of history. They're testaments to a shared longing to understand what happens when we leave this world. But here's the thing. What if these ancient blueprints are just the beginning? Could today's research into phenomena like past life memories or regression hypnosis reveal that the soul's journey is far more than myth? That's where modern evidence takes the stage, and trust me, it's just as intriguing. What if a child, barely old enough to speak, began telling stories about a life that wasn't theirs? Not imaginary adventures with dragons or superheroes, but memories of specific places, people, and even events they'd never encountered before. For decades, Dr. Ian Stevenson, a pioneering psychiatrist, dedicated his career to this startling phenomenon: children who seemed to recall past lives. These cases weren't just fragments of whimsical childhood imagination. They came with striking details that could often be verified. But how do you even begin to scientifically approach something so seemingly beyond science? Stevenson started by focusing on claims that could be investigated. He traveled across the globe, documenting over 2,500 cases where children spoke about previous lives. These weren't casual interviews either. Stevenson applied the kind of rigorous methods you'd expect from someone determined to bridge the gap between science and the intangible. In his 2-volume work, Reincarnation and Biology, Stevenson explored cases where children's birthmarks or physical abnormalities corresponded with injuries or deaths reported in the lives they claimed to remember. These weren't minor coincidences. There were cases of children with peculiar scars or malformed body parts that aligned eerily with wounds confirmed in historical records, such as fatal stab wounds or amputations. But these physical clues were only part of the story. Many of the children displayed behaviors and emotions connected to their alleged past lives. In one study involving 387 cases, Stevenson observed that over a third of the children had phobias directly linked to their manner of death in the previous life they recounted. These fears often emerged at a very young age, long before they would have been exposed to the specific details of those traumas. Some children also exhibited unusual habits or preferences that couldn't easily be explained by their upbringing. For instance, in families where reincarnation wasn't a cultural belief, children still demonstrated behaviors that seemed entirely out of context, such as recalling rituals, exhibiting regional accents, or displaying inexplicable emotional ties to strangers. Of course, these claims have often been met with skepticism. One criticism is that many cases originate in cultures where reincarnation is an accepted belief, raising questions about parental influence. Stevenson tackled this directly by studying cases in regions where reincarnation wasn't part of the dominant worldview. Notably, in North America, he investigated 79 cases. Fewer of them provided detailed, verifiable memories, but they still shared common elements with those from cultures steeped in the tradition of rebirth. This included young children spontaneously speaking about previous lives, naming individuals, or describing locales they had no conceivable way of knowing. One of Stevenson's key strengths was his meticulous approach to these investigations. He didn't accept claims at face value. Instead, he would verify them against historical and local records, evaluating every possibility from fraud to coincidence to misinformation. For the strongest cases, alternative explanations just didn't hold up. Take the example of children who described families or events from distant towns they'd never visited, details that were later confirmed by those living in the area. Some of these children showed a strong emotional connection to their previous families, even referring to them by name and displaying deep grief when confronted with the reality that they no longer belong to those lives. Perhaps most compelling is how consistently these cases occur across cultural and religious boundaries. From rural villages in India to small towns in the United States, the stories emerge with certain patterns. The children begin recalling memories around 2 or 3 years old. They often describe sudden or traumatic deaths, and their recollections usually fade as they grow older. This consistency hints at something deeper than cultural narrative. It suggests an underlying process tied to the essence of who we are. And yet, for all their compelling elements, Stevenson's findings have never fully silenced skepticism. Even so, his work, continued today by researchers like Dr. Jim Tucker, has opened an extraordinary window into what might lie beyond the boundaries of our current understanding. If these cases hint at the survival of something beyond death, what does that suggest about the journey of the soul? And if children can spontaneously recall details from past lives, are there other ways we might uncover hidden knowledge about our spiritual existence? As it turns out, some believe the answers lie deep in the mind's recesses, and regression hypnosis promises another fascinating piece of the puzzle. Could your soul be planning its next life right now, guided by a higher wisdom? It's a fascinating idea, and one that Michael Newton, a hypnotherapist turned investigator, spent years exploring. Using a deep state of hypnosis, Newton wasn't just helping clients relax or recall moments from their present lives. Instead, through regression hypnosis, he uncovered something extraordinary. His clients consistently described vivid, detailed experiences that seemed to occur outside their current lifetime. Moments between lives where the soul resides in a spiritual realm. These accounts, shared by thousands of individuals from every background and belief system, painted a remarkably consistent picture of what happens after death and before rebirth. Newton's findings outline a structured journey for the soul, beginning with what he referred to as the life review. This isn't quite like the concept of heavenly judgment often depicted in religions. Instead, subjects described being guided by an overwhelming sense of love, revisiting their previous life's moments in incredible detail. What stood out was the way they experienced the effects of their actions, not just looking back on what they did, but actually feeling the emotions they had caused others to experience. Happiness, pain, indifference, all of it was reflected back to the soul in a way that encouraged deep understanding. As his research participants often shared, this wasn't about punishment, it was about learning. Newton emphasized that this process fosters empathy, allowing individuals to see the threads connecting their choices and interactions with others. Following this reflective stage, most of Newton's subjects described entering a phase of healing. Here, the soul moves into what they often referred to as a serene, peaceful space, a kind of spiritual hospital. The purpose, according to these accounts, is to recover from the emotional challenges of the life that just ended. For some, this might mean releasing guilt or painful memories. For others, it might involve rebalancing energy that has become blocked or drained through difficult experiences. A fascinating element of this phase is the presence of spiritual guides, described as beings of light or wisdom, who assist in this process. The sense of calm, safety, and renewal described during this phase stood out across countless sessions, suggesting a universal need for rest and restoration before moving forward. Once healed, the soul enters what Newton's research identified as the planning stage. If you've ever wondered whether your life has meaning or if it's driven by random chance, this stage offers a surprising answer. Here, souls work with what clients referred to as the Council of Elders, or a Council of Wisdom, a group of highly advanced beings who help them prepare for their next life. These wise entities guide the soul in selecting key aspects of its next incarnation, the challenges it will face, the lessons it will learn, and the circumstances it will encounter. Everything from relationships to major life struggles appears to be deliberate, chosen not out of punishment but for opportunity. Subjects frequently mentioned that even the most difficult aspects of life, illness, betrayal, loss, were often selected to stretch the soul's capacity for growth and understanding. What's most intriguing is how these accounts align so consistently, even when the individuals accessing them have no prior knowledge of Newton's work or similar teachings. Whether the subject identified as religious, atheist, or somewhere in between, the descriptions of these stages overlap in incredible ways. This consistency becomes even more fascinating when compared to ancient texts like the Egyptian Book of the Dead or the Tibetan Bardo Thodol. Just as those texts describe the soul's journey through trials and preparation, Newton's research suggests a similar structure rooted in reflection, healing, and intentional planning. The idea that souls deliberately choose their life circumstances shifts how we might view our struggles. It suggests that the obstacles, And even the relationships we face aren't random, but part of a complex, purposeful design, thoughtful. Imagine what that means for how you approach your day-to-day life. The challenging coworker, the unexpected detour, the moments of heartbreak. If everything is part of a larger tapestry, woven deliberately for growth, then even adversity carries profound meaning. Newton's findings offer a transformational perspective that life itself is a collaborative process between the human experience and the eternal soul. Through this lens, your journey takes on a new dimension, one where purpose and evolution are intricately connected at every step. But if this process is universal, if every one of us follows these same steps, what does that mean for how we approach death, cuckle? Or better yet, what does that say about the ultimate goal of living? Your life, with all its twists, challenges, and joys, may not be random at all. Instead, it could be a carefully chosen chapter, selected by your soul to grow, heal, and evolve. Ancient texts and modern research suggest that your struggles hold meaning. They're opportunities designed to shape your spiritual journey. Thoughtful. Reflect on this. What if every relationship, every hardship, even every moment of joy was chosen for a reason? This perspective transforms how we view life and death. Knowing this, could you begin to see your experiences not as obstacles, but as stepping stones towards something far greater?